Hello and welcome tonight to episode number 45 of JRock's Pop Culture Revolution. I am your host, Jason JRock Houston, and we're going to do something a little different tonight in the introduction. I want you guys to kind of see if you can guess what tonight's episode is going to be on. Okay, so I'm going to give you guys a huge clue here, and let's see if you get it, okay? Now, okay, this is just kind of this is on a classic movie from the 1980s, 1987 to be exact, and is when it originally came out. And if you see in the movie, at the beginning of the movie, there's this, there are these words that go, scroll up and on the screen. So I'm going to read the opening monologue, kind of the words that scroll up on the screen as the movie starts. So let's see if you can guess this. And anybody seen the movie, I think you're gonna get this. Okay, the story takes place in a galaxy very, very far away. A ruthless race called the Spaceballs. There's a huge, there's a huge hint right there. Okay, so I'm going to start this over, guys. But this is really fun. I'm going to see if you guys get this. The story takes place in a galaxy very, very far away. A ruthless race called the Spaceballs lives on planet Spaceballs. The Spaceballs have foolishly used up their planet's atmosphere. So, what they've got to do now is they are going to devise a plan to steal the air from their peaceful neighborhood planet, Drudea. Princess Vespa on Drudea is getting married that day. Unfortunately, her for her, the Spaceball, so preparing their scheme. If you can read this, then you don't need glasses, okay? Well, you know, of course, I'm talking about this movie right here. And it, of course, is Spaceballs, starring and directed by the legendary comedian, actor, director Mel Brooks. And we're going to be talking about what a major role he had in the making of this film. But also, along with Mel Brooks, we also get the other star cast of this is Rick Moranis and the late great John Candy. So let's get into this now. I got to tell you a little bit about my history with Spaceballs. I remember, I was a teenager when the movie originally came out, and I remember seeing the previews in the movies and the commercials for the movie on TV back in the day. And I was a huge Star Wars fan, and equally as much of a Star Trek geek as anybody out there. So, a lot of people, you're either a Star Wars fan or you're a Star Trek fan. A lot of people are under belief you can't do both, but I'm one of the people that believe you can. Anyway, so I originally remember when Spaceballs came out originally, as big of a Star Trek and a Star Wars fan as I wasn't really too interested in seeing Spaceballs. I remember when it came out in the movie theater, for the simple fact that I was a huge Star Wars fan, and again, maybe to having to do with the fact that I was a teenager, really didn't study these things as much as I do now, even. But Spaceballs at the time, I had no interest in seeing it because I was a Star Wars fan, and I thought, again, after watching the film today, I kind of realized this. But at the time, knowing very little about the film, I didn't really give it a chance. I didn't go see it in the theater. Now, years later, when it would play late at night on cable TV, I eventually caught it, and it was funny. But again, I remember originally not wanting to go see it in the movie theater because I was a Star Wars fan. I thought, that looks it just kind of looks like a ripoff of Star Wars. It's doesn't seem like there's anything original in there. And again, this is kind of judging the movie without having seen it. Now, I will tell you, again, as I showed you, I got this DVD because, I'm always going online looking for ideas for episodes. And the internet is a great tool, in coming up with ideas. And so I'd actually seen this advertised on Amazon. And I thought, you know what, it'd be fun to kind of get the movie, even though I hadn't seen it when it was originally out in the theater. I had seen it, since, like I said, when it plays late night on cable TV and stuff. And so I had seen it, but it's been a number of years since I've seen it. So I wanted to give Spaceballs kind of, for the first time in my life, really the attention I felt it deserved. So I'm like, I'm not only going to purchase the DVD and Blu-ray, but I am going to watch it from home, my own personal DVD slash Blu-ray player. And I got up today, if you can believe this, because even on the weekends when I don't have to get up early to go to work, I still get up early. I don't know what it is. I just cannot sleep in late. But so I thought, okay, I'm going to get up early anyways. Get this, I got up about 5:30 in the morning, and I put on the movie, and man, it was early morning, but I was cracking up. I mean, again, I for the first time ever watching this film from top to bottom, just man, I was laughing, and I was really paying attention because again, it's early in the morning. Other people in the house are sleeping, animals are sleeping, and so I've got the volume on, just low enough that I can hear everything and still enjoy it, and because I didn't want to disturb anybody else in the house, but um, again, just cracking up 5:30 in the morning, and so again, the movie itself was 96 minutes, and man, I was laughing all the way through. So um, that's kind of my history with the movie up until this point. Now, let's give you a few kind of fun facts about this movie, Spaceballs. Of course, let's talk about the cast of characters. And again, um, Mel Brooks' original concept for Spaceballs is because Star is mostly based on like it's supposed to be a parody of Star Wars, really, but it's a combination of like Star Wars, Star Trek, um, mostly Star Wars, though. Okay, let's be honest. I mean, there's certain things about the movie you just cannot deny were influenced by Star Wars, and we're going to get into some of that. So Mel Brooks' initial idea was he wanted to do like a not just a great comedy, but he wanted it to be a parody, a farce, if you will. Having heavily being influenced, as I said, by Star Wars, but he also had he didn't want Spaceballs to come across. First of all, he didn't want to come across as a Star Wars ripoff. He didn't look like he was. He didn't want to look like he was making a movie trying to be Star Wars because that was the furthest thing from his mind. He also, didn't want George Lucas getting upset, thinking that he was making a film making fun of Star Wars because again, none of those things were his intention. He was heavily, inspired by the success of Star Wars in that, and there's some characters in this movie that are really there's no denying that they're very much heavily influenced by Star Wars. We're going to get into some of that now. Let's get into some of the cast of characters. Mel Brooks, now he had a double role, okay? He played the role of both President Scrooge and Yogurt. And again, Yogurt is a parody of a legendary Star Wars character of Yoda, who we Star Wars fans first saw back in 1982 in The Empire Strikes Back, and then Yoda's been in pretty much every Star Wars movie ever since. Um, and so Yogurt, and again, when I'm watching the movie tonight, or this morning, I should say, I thought the character's name was Yoga, but then discovered no, it was Yogurt. So again, Yoda, Yogurt. Okay, there's no denying that the character of Yogurt in Spaceballs was very much inspired by Yoda from Star Wars. But they could not call it Yoda. It's a Yoda-like character. It's got a lot of similarities of Yoda, and so there's no denying the influence. But also, there's also there's some differences between the original Yoda and Yogurt. I mean, another thing is Yogurt is got a little more height on it than the original Yogurt, a little more taller. So there's that. Then we had John Candy, the late great John Candy, who I just loved. I mean, he was a great comedian. He's another one very much like John Ritter. I'm bringing up John Ritter because we just did episode 44 on Three's Company. We talked in that episode about just how John Ritter, very much like John Candy, died tragically young, and the outpouring of love people had, for both John Candy and John Ritter. I mean, again, these two actors that really had nothing to do together, do with one another, except for the fact they were both actors, comedians. They died tragically young, and so that's why I'm kind of bringing it up now. But so like Candy's character um, was called Barth, and so Barth is kind of like an oversized, kind of overweight space squirrel, if you will, and very much there's no denying that John Candy's character Barth is kind of a parody of Chewbacca again from the Star Wars series. Um, and John Candy was just great in the role. In fact, on the DVD here, after I got done watching the movie, there is you go to special features, there's a great interview with that features mainly Mel Brooks and a couple other people that worked behind the scenes on the film with Mel Brooks. But Mel Brooks is talking about how another thing about Spaceballs is he really encouraged the actors such as Rick Moranis and John Candy to kind of ad lib and just kind of have a major role and kind of how their characters are portrayed. He'd allow them to kind of just kind of like go off and kind of get very creative and whatever kind of came out. And so there's a lot of room, as the director Mel Brooks allowed the other actors to kind of improvise, and you can see that throughout the entire movie. It's just nonstop laughter. And something can be a parody without being too slapped. I mean, there's no way you can't say that Spaceballs is very much a slapstick comedy. Laughter all the way through. But again, like I said, the way Mel Brooks, created the film, it does not come. It does. We know that it was very much influenced by Star Wars, but it does not come across as he just trying to copy what they did in Star Wars. It's very much the opposite of that. He was maybe inspired by the success of Star Wars, and but he's kind of it gave him the idea to do Spaceballs. So there's that, and then so I think he did it in a very respectful way. So George Lucas and the audience seeing the movie didn't really think, oh yeah, hey, you're just trying to create a Star Wars rip. I mean, that's what I myself originally thought when it was in the movie theater, but as it turns out, that's not exactly what this is. Really, the complete opposite of that. Okay, now Bill Paxton, another late great actor, died tragically young. Bill Paxton, though, I got to tell you, before he did die a couple of years back, he had a pretty successful, movie career, and he could do everything from, drama, comedy, like this. And so he's an actor, a well-versed actor that could do many, many things. And even though Bill Paxton, died tragically young, I will say too, he had a very successful career. I mean, he really, even like John Candy and all these other actors we were talking about who passed on, they made their mark in the world. And sometimes you die tragically young, and yet you still leave your mark in the world. Bill Paxton, let's talk about, because he was known for doing movies such as Twister, Casper, and Spaceballs here. He had a number of hit movies. So I think, if Spaceballs was all that Bill Paxton was remembered for, that would be great in itself. But it even add more to the tragedy of dying so tragically young if that's all he was known for. Because as I've been talking about, he could do drama, comedy. He could do kind of anything. He could do action. I mean, a movie like Twister, that was a hit. Movie of action, that was just drama. It was a little bit of everything. And so Bill Paxton plays the role of Lone Star. Now, Lone Star is the hero of the movie. He's a combination of everything. Now, again, very much influenced by Star Wars, this character, but again, Lone Star is kind of the hero of the movie here. He's the main one that's going to save the day. He's a combination of Han Solo, Luke Skywalker, and Indiana Jones all rolled up into one. And what's interesting about that is Harrison Ford plays both the role of Indiana Jones and Indiana Jones and Han Solo, excuse me. And so that is kind of interesting in itself. But And again, Bill Paxton's a little bit younger than Harrison Ford, and yet, and again, talking about what he did in Spaceballs, pure comedy driven, and there are some scenes that he's in that is just hysterical. We're going to get into that. Of course, Rick Moranis, another character in here that no denying is very much Star Wars influence. I mean, let's check out the name of his character, Dark Lord Helmet. Okay, now they didn't call it Lord Vader. I mean, that would be too much like Star Wars. But I mean, look at this. Look at Rick Moranis as Dark Lord Helmet. Okay, I mean, the oversized, the just the craziness of that oversized, helmet to look like, Darth Vader. And Darth Vader to me, I mean, the to me the biggest difference between the original Darth Vader and Dark Helmet here is Rick Moranis' character in Spaceballs. Dark Helmet is not as menacing as a real Darth Vader in Star Wars. I mean, Darth Vader was a Lord of the Sith, and when he talked like this, and he had much more of a menacing voice. Whereas Rick Moranis was kind of a nerdy version, a nerdy version of Darth Vader, if you will. I mean, for real Darth Vader, he had his entire face mask. Okay, you see the nerdy looking Rick Moranis here with the glasses, and he doesn't look too menacing. He doesn't look too like you're gonna be too afraid of him. I mean, and there's some scenes where he comes across as a real bumbling idiot. And again, that's part of the joke. That's part of the beauty of a movie like Spaceballs is that it's a parody, it's a farce, and yet it's got its own original thing at the same time. And Mel Brooks is just he's got a real gift for filmmaking, and I can see why the films he put out remain so very memorable and special. Another great Mel Brooks film that I think going to have to do an episode on down the line is Young Frankenstein. I mean, and that's nothing like Spaceballs except for it's comedy and it's funny and stuff, but all for different reasons. And again, that's maybe another Mel Brooks picture we will look at down the line. Now, if you like Easter eggs in movies, and I know that you do, an Easter egg could be like when you're watching a movie, maybe there's somebody from a popular TV show that's in the movie that when you saw it originally, you weren't aware of it, they were in it or something. Well, I caught wind of this myself in regards to Spaceballs. In fact, another great classic TV show that I think we're going to have to do an episode on down the line is Too Close for Comfort, starring the late, great Ted Knight, who was, of course, originally came to fame on the Mary Tyler Moore Show. Well, I've been watching a lot of Too Close for Comfort lately. As you know, I like to do. I take classic TV shows, watch them on the weekend. But anyway, in fact, I was watching some Too Close for Comfort today just before doing this. But the reason I bring this up is there's an actor on that show that, if you didn't may or not know of it, appeared in Spaceballs, and I wasn't aware of it till today. But Jim J. Bullock as the lovable idiot Monroe Ficus from Too Close for Comfort, he plays in Spaceballs as Prince Valium. Now, he's the original prince that the princess is going to marry in Spaceballs. So again, so this is some kind of fun facts about the movie Spaceballs. Now let's give you a little more, some general facts. Okay, again, like I said, it was directed by Mel Brooks, but not only did Mel Brooks produce and write and direct the movie, but he also acted in it. He did two separate, completely separate roles, and that takes some real genius and ability to be able to do that. Now I thought it'd be fun talking about classic comedy movie from 1987 like Spaceballs to kind of remind you of some of the classic, most notable, quotable quotes from a movie. Okay, may the Schwartz be with you. Okay, I am your father's brother's nephew, cousin's former roommate. What's the matter? We ain't found shit. Comb the desert. Funny, she doesn't look Jewish. I see your Schwartz is as big as mine. Spaceballs, the movie. Okay, well, and then it says, okay, merchandising, merchandising, merchandising. We're surrounded by assholes. The power of a Schwartz. Now, if in any contact you're talking to people or you hear these quotes and you've seen Spaceballs, you're going to know these quotes were said in Spaceballs. Now, there's this one part in the movie where Rick Moranis and as Dark Helmet and Lone Star as a Han Solo character are kind of dueling it out with what is supposed to be the equivalent of a lightsaber. You know, they're having a duel, and Rick Moranis just says, you know, at one point, you know, may the Schwartz be with you. And then that's when he also says, I am your father's brother's nephew's cousin's former roommate. Now, this is classic Star Wars material because if you remember the line everybody remembered from 1982's Empire Strikes Back is when Darth Vader and Luke Skywalker are having their lightsaber duel. And everybody is shocked in the audience when Darth Vader does a big reveal. Obi-Wan never told you what really happened to your father. He told me you killed him. No, I am your father. The big reveal in Star Wars, you know, happened in Empire Strikes Back, the second movie, and that was a main part of a Star Wars story. And if you talk to anybody about Star Wars, that is one of the most repeated lines that people remember the most from the Star Wars saga, just you know, in general. And so that's kind of what this is a take on. And then you know Rick Moranis also he's like you know we got assholes around here, but let me tell you folks, okay, this is just kind of part of why Spaceballs is such a fun movie. You know, it's not really kind of poking fun at Star Wars, but it's kind of doing it in a fun way. Now, another interesting fact in the interview I watched with Mel Brooks on this DVD that I got, he talks about the fact that he thought he was very smart. He said, I didn't want George Lucas getting upset with me, trying, you know, I didn't want to, you know, maybe get sued and maybe not be able to make Spaceballs. So I stayed on friendly terms with him. I let him know, first of all, about the project. And to my surprise, George Lucas kind of, he was honored that we were doing a film like Spaceballs. And he was very much into to the movie. And then eventually Mel Brooks asked him, hey, would you mind if we worked on the movie at your Lucas Studios and use some of the sound equipment? He said, and he felt that way. I felt that not only could me and George Lucas work together, but he could be part of the film, feel like he was part of the film. And, you know, I didn't, that way I could kind of know that we were in his good graces and that there wasn't going to be any problems. And so very, very smart on Mel Brooks's part indeed. Now, let's talk about Mel Brooks as Yogurt. Mel Brooks played Yogurt, a diminutive gold-robed character who was essentially the movie's parody of Yoda, as I said, while also serving as the spoof of a mystical mentor architect. Now, basically, you know, in Star Wars, you had Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then Yoda from Star Wars, of course. He was a Jedi Knight master. He trained all the Jedis, and so he was a big master of all the Jedis in Star Wars. So this is the equivalent of Yoda, but they give it the funny name of yogurt. Okay, and again, I think the reason for that is it looks enough like Yoda. We know what it's supposed to be, and yet it's got its own unique name. It's got different features. It's not a carbon copy of Yoda. Like I said, for one thing, what stands out about yogurt is he is a lot taller. He's got some height on him compared to the original Yoda. Now, also, Mel Brooks talks in the interview on the DVD about the fact the makeup he had to wear and how it ran into his eyes and it caused his eyes to burn and stuff. And so that was kind of an issue while he was getting made up to look like yogurt. So that became an issue. But I remember years ago reading that the actor who played the Tin Man in The Wizard of Oz had similar issues because of the makeup they were using at the time ran into his eyes and it caused him some issues. So it's kind of, we don't stop and think about these things when people are the stuff that goes on behind the scenes of making these movies. But I mean, Mel Brooks was a real warrior, I guess, in making this film, going through something like that. So, who is Yogurt? Just for anybody that's wanting to know, he explains the nature of the Schwartz. Now, again, the Schwartz is kind of the equivalent of the Force. If you're a Star Wars fan, may the Force be with you. Force is like a mystical, magical power, but the Force is more of this thing you're just supposed to believe in. You don't see it. Whereas the Schwartz it's also this mystical power, but the difference in the Schwartz is it lights up. You can see it. And so, and Mel Brooks talks about that. He says, yeah, the Schwartz, very much like the Force, but you can see the Schwartz. Okay. And so that makes it stand out, too. Helps Lone Star understand his destiny. Again, very much like Yoda helps young Luke Skywalker in Star Wars, who is supposed to be the great white hope of all the Jedis, the future of the Jedi Knights. Helps him to see his destiny, and he's supposed to go on to become a Jedi Knight like his father. Okay, he knows about the relationship between Lone Star and Princess Vespa. It provides the movie's famous merchandise gag. Now let's talk about that because one of the most quotable things, famous quotes from a movie is where you see yogurt and he's like, merchandising, merchandising, merchandising. And again, one of the things that when Spaceballs was being made, that Mel Brooks made an agreement with George Lucas because at the time, Star Wars was heavily merchandised. I mean, even to this day, you see a ton of Star Wars merchandise that is still being sold. But when I was a kid, you had action figures, and it was really popular. It was in the prime, when some of these movies had just come out. And so he promised Lucas that he was not going to be a copycat and merchandise Spaceballs. He wasn't going to sell Spaceballs action figures. Think of the money he could have made had he done that. But Mel Brooks, being a man of his word, he said, "Okay, George." So that was kind of another farce, another kind of thing they were joking about in the movie. That's why you've seen those scenes where they had the space balls action figures and the sheets and the blankets. And at one point, Yogurt is saying, merchandising, and that was kind of a little kind of nod to the agreement that him and George Lucas had. So as I'm watching the film today, I see that and I'm like, oh boy, just think of all the merchandising they could have done. But apparently, again, that was kind of a little nod to the agreement him and George Lucas made about Mel Brooks wasn't going to copycat and merchandise Spaceballs the way Lucas had done the Star Wars characters. So that is kind of something that is really noteworthy, I think, here. And so let's talk about kind of, Mel Brooks' role in the movie. Okay, he was the director, the writer, the producer, and one of the leading actors. And yet, so not only did he have to write the material and in charge of creating a lot of the ideas, but he had to direct himself as well as the other actors. Now, Mel Brooks apparently plays 4 different characters actually. Okay, this is really noteworthy. He played President Scrooge, as we mentioned, the incompetent leader of Planet Spaceball. I mean, first of all, who's going to name Planet Spaceball? I mean, that's pretty crazy itself. Yogurt, the mystical Schwartz master, the villager. Okay, a character seen during Dradinian scenes. The narrator, providing the opening narration. And again, so the narration, what I read at the beginning of the episode tonight, telling you guys, let's see if you can guess what tonight's episode is going to be on. So if you go back and you check out the movie after watching this, I urge you to go back and watch the start of the movie, very much like Star Wars, a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away. So that's kind of a take of that. Now, again, like I just got done talking about the merchandising scene. Um, one of Yogurt's most famous scenes is in his explanation of the movie's merchandise. He essentially tells the audience that while Spaceballs is a movie, the real money is in the merchandising. He then proceeds to demonstrate products bearing the Spaceballs name. This is particularly clever because it satirizes the enormous merchandising empire surrounded by Star Wars and other blockbuster franchises. The joke is has aged remarkably. And again, when I'm watching this today, this is one of the scenes that's most memorable to me, and I picked up on it right away. And so it's particularly clever because it really does, put that into perspective. And as I said, the joke has aged remarkably well. In fact, Spaceballs was poking fun at Hollywood's obsession with merchandise while simultaneously making merchandise for Spaceballs. I mean, so it just doesn't get any funnier than that. And then here's we kind of already explained some of this, but here's a fascinating connection to George Lucas. Mel Brooks has said that he was concerned, in fact, that Spaceballs was poking fun at Hollywood's obsession with merchandise while simultaneously making the merchandise, for Spaceballs. But let's get to George Lucas's connection. Mel Brooks has said that he was concerned about how George Lucas would react to Spaceballs rather than simply going ahead and parodying Star Wars. Brooks had discussions with Lucasfilms, and this is kind of what the discussion was about. One important condition was that Spaceballs wouldn't simply copy existing Star Wars merchandise and confuse it with the real thing. The resulting merchandising jokes, therefore, became part of the film's satire rather than an attempt to imitate the actual Star Wars product line. And I could see why that would be an important kind of thing, because again, you're poking fun. It's a fun farce parody type of a movie, but at the same time, if there was to be kind of any kind of even a Spaceballs poster, like again, you look at a poster of Yogurt, and people are going to know that's definitely Yoda inspired, Star Wars inspired, but there are enough different features separating Yoda from Yogurt. For example, Yoda, the real Yoda is actually green. Yogurt's kind of got more of a gold kind of coloring to it, like a gold sparkle, if you will. So, and he's got height on him. He's a little taller than the actual Yoda. So you can look at the two characters and know, okay, well, Yogurt is kind of Yoda inspired, yes, but it's not a carbon copy of it. So somebody looking at it is going to know it's Yoda inspired, maybe, but you're not going to be accused of trying to make people that know it's Star Wars. And in fact, that's the thing about Spaceballs. While it is very much a parody, a farce of Star Wars, it's also Spaceballs got its own identity. I mean, for one thing, got a great the Spaceballs theme in the movie is a great kind of theme song. One of those movie soundtrack songs that you never, and it's got originality all its own. So while it's a movie kind of poking fun at Star Wars. Spaceballs has got its own thing because Barf and Yogurt and Lone Star are they're we know who influenced those characters, but they really kind of stand out on their own. That we know Spaceballs is Spaceballs. It's not Star Wars. We know what they're poking fun of, but there's no confusion that that's actually there's quite a difference between Lone Star and Han Solo. I mean, Lone Star is very much Han Solo influenced, but it very much there's no confusion. I mean, you look at Harrison Ford as Han Solo, and you look at Bill Paxton as Lone Star. We know which one inspired the other one, and yet Lone Star, the character of Lone Star, is different enough that it's really it's Spaceballs, if you know what I mean. And so I think that's really kind of an important thing to kind of talk about here. So let's talk about Mel Brooks as the director of Spaceballs. Mel Brooks, of course, directed Spaceballs, released by MGM on June 24th, 1987, as we said at the top of the episode tonight. It was his first feature as director in 6 years, okay? Following To Be or Not to Be, which was in 1983. At the time, it was a relatively ambitious production with a reported budget of about $22.7 million. Brooks wanted to make a big science fiction comedy. Well, he really accomplished that. And like I said, while we know it's a parody of Star Wars, very much heavily inspired by Star Wars, Spaceballs really has an identity of its own. If you know what I mean. I mean, there's no way somebody could watch this movie Spaceballs and mistake it for a Star Wars film. There's just no mistaking. They got their own identity, and I think as a filmmaker, Mel Brooks accomplished that here. He was heavily involved with the rewriting of the movie. One of the most fascinating facts about Brooks as a director is how much he tested and reshaped the comedy. It says the first draft of Spaceballs was reportedly an enormous 315-page screenplay. Brooks had about 50 people read it and asked them to make the jokes they liked, that they didn't like. He used the feedback to determine which material worked and which material didn't. That's a very important thing to be able to do as a filmmaker, that you get other people's opinions, find out what their natural reactions are. And if you're willing to kind of hear what other people have to say, it'll really help you to shape what you're doing, and that's why I think Spaceballs as a movie overall really landed with me today. I mean, when I'm watching it for the first time in years, wow, how did I not go see this when it was in the movie theater? Man, I just, but had the opportunity to do it today. First time seeing it in years, and man, it really has a new special place in my heart. I will tell you that. And again, as we said, Mel Brooks, he directed while acting in the film, which playing 4 different roles. So it's hard enough to stay in one character, but when you got 4 different roles, that's kind of you got to get the voice down and the personality and everything. So and that's what it said. I was reading. Mel Brooks had a very specific philosophy about comedy. Brooks didn't want Spaceballs to feel like a collection of unrelated sketches. I mean, again, that would just not make any sense to do a film like this. And so it says that's important because Spaceballs contains an enormous number of individual gags, but it still has a recognizable adventure storyline to the movie and the plot. And like we said, he encouraged improvisation with all the actors. He wanted them to kind of really play a role in helping to kind of develop their characters. And so that's great when actors are allowed to do that. Now, very much like we talked about in the when we did our episode on Ferris Bueller's Day Off, one of my favorite parts of that movie was like at the end when he comes out and he's like, "Wait a minute, you're still here? The movie's over. Go home." Well, that became a more frequent thing that filmmakers started doing. Even to the point where a lot of the Marvel, the comic book movies these days, DC movies, when you go see those movies, people know now. Don't leave after, wait till the credits roll, and then they're going to have a special preview scene of, what's coming next. So that's something that became known as the fourth wall. Brooks is one of the great American directors of fourth wall comedy. In Spaceballs, characters don't always behave as though they're living a normal fictional universe. They sometimes seem to understand that they're inside a movie. Okay, the most famous example of this probably is a sequence in which characters discover that the events of Spaceballs are already available on video. It's an extremely Brooks Sheen joke. The characters are watching the movie they're currently in. Brooks also used this technique to make fun of Hollywood itself, not merely Star Wars. And so that's another beautiful thing about the movies. Hey, let's not just make this kind of a farce on Star Wars. Let's make some jokes about Hollywood. The Hollywood community. Brooks wanted the parody to look convincing. Again, there's a certain way to do something like this. I mean, he could have just had like these different sketches, but it would not have been a good movie. The thing that makes Spaceballs work to me as a movie is that while it's a very much a parody inspired Star Wars kind of farce, Spaceballs, they got their own characters. It's got its own identity. And so that's to me what really makes the film stand out. It's not at all a Star Wars ripoff or anything like that, like I originally thought it was. And the giant dark helmet is a perfect example of Brooks's directing. I mean, Brooks and his team took the Darth Vader concept and pushed it to its absurdity. That is a great word, absurdity. Because again, look at this, okay? Mission accomplished. I mean, that is the most absurd thing I have ever seen. That does not look like a menacing Darth Vader at all. You see this, okay, you're going to laugh. It's pure comedy all the way. So the movie poster, as a cover of a DVD, it works because if I was seeing that for the first, I mean, I tell you, when I was, I went on Amazon and I was searching for ideas and I seen that I could purchase that. And so very much I went and tried to purchase this on Amazon. But seeing that, I thought, oh, Spaceballs, that would be a fun episode to do. And I thought, I very much want to get it and add this to my DVD collection. And I knew I was going to watch it before I did tonight's episode. And like I said, got up 5:30 in the morning, did it real early before anybody else got up. I was able to have my own private movie screening, and it was really enjoyable and fun. And even though this is a movie from 1987, I laughed like crazy. I would highly recommend any. But this is like going to Blockbuster back in the day and seeing this cool DVD. You know what? Even if I didn't know what Spaceball was, the cover is so cool. I'd want to see it. I gotta rent this. I gotta buy it. So to me, very much mission accomplished. And so that is kind of my take on Spaceballs. But just a few more things in closing. Okay. Now Mel Brooks knew when a joke had gone too far, and that's always important because we want to laugh when we go to the movies. We want to have a good time. I really enjoy comedies, but it's got to be believable. And okay, and again, seeing a movie like Spaceballs, okay, we know that there's no such thing as an oversized squirrel like Barf, but again, this is a farce, it's science fiction, so we allow ourselves to believe that these things are possible, that these type of characters possible. It's movies, but they didn't take it too far. And so that's why this worked. So again, contemporary reporting from the set gives an amusing glimpse into Brooks's directing process. Brooks and the actors were constantly generating new material. His producer, Ezra Swerdlow, explained that Brooks and Rick Moranis were so full of ideas that sometimes someone had to remind them to return to the actual script and story. Okay. I mean, just think about that. Um, that's an interesting contradiction. Brooks encouraged improvisation, as we said, and new jokes, but he also had to be the person who eventually said, "Enough, move on." you know, that's the director's job in a comedy like this, and he really accomplished this. Now, final thing in wrapping this up tonight is you got to ask yourself, why is Spaceballs so important to Mel Brooks? The first glance, Spaceballs can look like just pure silliness, and that's kind of what I thought when it was in the movie theater. That's had a lot to do why I didn't go see it originally. But as a piece of directing, it's actually quite sophisticated, and I do agree with that. If you watch the movie, you're going to see this for yourselves. Mel Brooks does a great job of combining slapstick, satire, visual comedy, wordplay, fourth wall jokes. That's a big part of this. Hollywood satire, and then okay, so let's also talk about. And he doesn't just parody Star Wars. Again, I think that's what makes Spaceballs so unique, because it is very much heavily influenced, inspired by Star Wars, but it pokes fun at other things such as Hollywood merchandising, blockbuster filmmaking, science fiction cliches, studio executives, sequels, special effects. Now this movie is loaded with special effects, actors' egos, and the conventions of heroic storytelling. Now, one of the best examples that I can give you on Mel Brooks, what a genius he is as a director, is consider the comb the desert sequence. On paper, basic joke is incredible. It's just incredibly stupid. But when you see it on the screen, you get it. I mean, it's a laugh fest. A massive army searching in a desert using an enormous comb. Again, on paper, doesn't seem very funny, but when you see it on the screen, it's a barrel of laughs. You just can't help cracking up. But Brooks makes the gag progressively bigger when you see it, and so that is kind of the point of being a great director. Now, I tell you, this has been so much fun, and I got to tell you guys, originally we are going to do Spaceballs next week, because I originally wanted to do this week a new live Kiss CD came out celebrating the 50th anniversary of Kiss playing at Anaheim Stadium back in 1976. Now, here's the thing. I ordered it, and I was expecting to have a CD, but it's not going to come until Tuesday, the 25th. So I went ahead. I'm all ready to do the next episode. And I'm already going to prepare you, because we do episode number 46 on Kiss Destroys Anaheim. It's looking very much like it's going to be at least a 2 to 3 part episode, because besides the CD, there's so much story to talk about behind the seat, behind the playing Anaheim Stadium, and talk about the CD, the songs on the CD, the event itself that took place 50 years ago when they played Anaheim Stadium, some things that happened since, and so it's going to be a real fun 2 to 3 part episode. But thanks for tuning in tonight to episode 45 of JRock's Pop Culture Revolution, and I had such a great time watching this. So again, if you have not seen Spaceballs at all, or you're going to crack up just as I did. First time seen it in years. And I will tell you, if you've seen it but you haven't seen it in years, go back and check this out. You probably go on YouTube and even watch if you don't want to buy the movie like I did. But we encourage everybody to go out and buy this, because I tell you, I got a huge DVD collection. I got at least probably over 200 to 300 of these DVD movies. And yes, folks, that is old school, but that is me. So that is part of the reason I do this show. I really enjoy talking about pop culture and the classic movies such as Spaceballs. This has been so much fun. I can't wait to see you guys next week. Bye for now.